Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Palumbo, and I'm the host of the Palumbo podcast, where we speak to founders of businesses to learn how we rose to the top. Today, we have with us Dr. Stein. Dr. Stein is a clinical psychologist, founder, and executive chairman of Multi Health Systems, a three-time winner of Profit 100, which is fastest growing companies in Canada, one of Canada's best managed companies since 2013, Entrepreneur of the Year in 2015 in Ontario, and Canada's 10 most admired corporate cultures. So, Dr. Stein, thanks for being on today. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Phil.
All right. So, emotional intelligence is a big part of your focus, which is really an interesting subject. So, tell me first, what is the difference between IQ and EQ?
Sure. Sort of the quick way of describing it is IQ is what gets you in the door, but EQ is what gets you upstairs. So IQ is kind of the regular kinds of memory and math functions and the things we do in school that we're used to. Whereas EQ is a sort of a newer concept, and it's more about understanding your emotions, using your emotions, interpersonal skills, almost like street smarts. So if you think of one being school smarts and the other being street smarts, put them together, and that's what you're looking at.
Yeah. So are there any studies on which individuals perform better as it relates to their career? One who has a high EQ, or is it one who has a high IQ?
Well, the way we look at it is a certain amount of IQ is obviously necessary. You're not going to get to the job unless you're smart enough to know what it's about and how to do it. But if you really want to rise above, that's where emotional intelligence kicks in. So let's say, I don't know, you're an accountant and you're great, with numbers and, behind the scenes, but you're not really good with clients. What we find is the ones who rise to the top, who get into management positions or leadership positions, are those with the good interpersonal skills, the good emotional skills. They get you to the top.
Interesting. So you founded your own business 43 years ago, so just a short time ago. And
Yeah.
so how did you get into this field? What attracted you to emotional intelligence? And you made a business out of it. So walk me through that process.
Well, we actually started before emotional intelligence, with more traditional psychological things like ADHD, attention deficit disorder, depression, anxiety. I got into business accidentally. I have no training in business. I'm not a business person. As you mentioned, I'm a psychologist. I should not have succeeded in business. I don't have any of the right skills traditionally in terms of business. What happened is while working as a psychologist, 43 years ago, or even more than that, 45 years ago, I started playing around with computers, and these two guys in California, you might have heard of them, Steve and Steve, Jobs and Wozniak, created a company that's called Apple, right? And we were having some difficulty getting kids to do their assessments. They didn't like the tests that we gave them. They would actually throw them at us. And those computers, that Apple IIe just came out. So I thought, why don't we put some of these tests on a computer and see what happens? We did that. And not only did the kids love them, but we discovered more about these kids than any of the psychologists or psychiatrists had learned previously. So that got me interested, and I wanted to work on that. But the mental health center I was working at didn't care about that. So I said, well, maybe I'll just do this on my own. My wife was on maternity leave with our first daughter, and we just built a little company in our basement and started computerizing psychological tests. And that led to where we are now with about 230 employees, and we're international with offices in Canada, employees in the US, and an office in Belfast.
So tell me about the business exactly. So you started in your basement, and what did you do exactly? You computerized.
We computerize psychological tests to make it easier for psychologists to assess their clients, right? So, if someone came in and they had a problem with, attention, or they're feeling depressed, we computerize the intake process so they can get a better handle on what was going on. So that's where we first started. And then what happened next is I had colleagues who worked in public safety area. They were looking at risk assessment of dangerous offenders coming out of prisons. And so I got involved in that area, and we built a whole big business around risk assessment, working with Federal Bureau of Prisons and all kinds of prisons around the world. helping them look at risks of some of the people that are incarcerated. And then we broke into the corporate market. That's where emotional intelligence came in, where another colleague of mine was playing around with this idea that I explained earlier, that, when we look at successful people in life, we've discovered, psychologists have known for a long time, that IQ doesn't predict success. It predicts how well you'll do in school. But as you know, people who do well in school don't always do well in life.
Mm.
And the idea was to find out what are the factors that really help people in life succeed. And that's where emotional intelligence came in. So we published the world's first test of emotional intelligence back in the early 1990s. And we've been working with that with the military and with large corporations all over the world, using this concept of emotional intelligence, measuring it and helping people develop it.
So when you say measure it, so when you took your concept and you brought it to the corporate world, right?
Yep.
How exactly did that go? How exactly did that happen? Right. So what did you do exactly? You built tests for the corporate world?
Yes, we built a test. And we use a test in either selection or development, people who are going to be promoted into leadership. Actually, one of our first big studies was with the U.S. Air Force, looking at recruiters, trying to look at what made Air Force recruiters successful. So the test is an instrument you could take online, takes about 20 minutes, asks you a number of questions, and then we bring that into a number of scores. And that scores, that tells us things like, whether you're assertive or not, are you good expressing emotions or not? There's about 15 factors that we look at, and we found that depending on what occupation or what kind of job we're looking at, some of those factors can really predict your success in those areas.
So is it similar to like DISC?
It's similar and different. I mean, DISC is more based on personality. So personality are pretty much unchangeable characteristics, right? You're introverted, you're extroverted. And what we discovered is it doesn't really matter. Some good salespeople, you think they're extroverted, but there are some who are introverted who are really successful. So the difference between those personality skills and our emotional skills is they're more malleable, they're trainable. So if you're introverted, you can still learn to be assertive, which is an emotional skill. You can learn to be a problem solver. You can learn to close the sale. These are emotional skills, not personality skills. So it differs from tools like the DISC.
So walk me through that. So if I am an introvert, you're saying I can still be a great salesman.
Right. Yeah, because what you're doing, number one, is you're empathic, which we found is a very good predictor of success. So that means you know what the customer wants. You don't tell them, I'm going to sell you this car, whether it suits you or not. It's what kind of car are you looking for? How do you drive? Asking the right questions to get into the mind of the customer. That's empathy. And then you have to follow that up with assertiveness, for example, which is being able to tell you, I know exactly what car would be good for you. Why don't we come and take a look at this one? So it's a combination of these emotional skills that really lead to success. And we've done over 30 years of research looking at this in a variety of areas, everything from sales to leadership to medical to legal, accountants, all kinds of areas.
Stephen, I when I think about this, the empathy part I understand, and that's the asking of questions, and I understand the assertiveness part, which is okay. Here's the concerns or issues you have based on the questions I asked you, and here's the solution, right? However, the one part that I really recognized is, for example, right, you come into my office and you're a prospective client. The most important thing about that meeting is for us to go from here to here, right? So do something where there's glue, that all of a sudden we glue together, right? And a lot of that has to do with just the first 5 minutes learning about you learning about me, and finding that common bond, even before you get into the business aspect of what I do or what anybody does. Am I right about that?
You're 100% right. And that's what we call empathy. That's really digging in and finding out, where do we connect? What do we have in common? What are the things that we can bond on? I don't want to start off by selling you anything. I want to know who you are. I want to build that relationship. So it's a combination of empathy, interpersonal skills, and then assertiveness. And those, for any sales situation or getting to know someone, those are critical.
Where does authenticity come into play?
Well, authenticity runs throughout the whole thing. I mean, being authentic means, doing what you say you're going to do, being transparent. There's no hidden motive for what I'm trying to do with you. I really want to understand you. I'm not, it's not that I'm trying to understand you so I can manipulate you. That's where you become inauthentic. And that's where some salespeople kind of lose it. If you and I meet and I can see that you're just trying to find out the hot buttons so you can make me buy something I don't want to buy, that's not authentic. But if I get the sense that you're really interested in me and you really are asking the right questions and you're following up and I can see that you're following that, that's a sign of authenticity. Very important when you're working with someone.
Oh my goodness, it's unbelievable. So here's how I look at it. It's exactly what you just said, right? So we're not saying that you go into the meeting and trying to find and push ways to glue with that person,
Mhm.
but it has to come naturally, and it comes naturally through the passion of what you do in your career, right? Because you're there to help that person, right, in a certain function. We happen to help people in managing their money. So the first part of that is, let's see if we can glue together, right? Let's see if we can really bond together. And you know what, Stephen, if we don't bond and the chemistry is not there, then the relationship's not going to work, especially what we do for a living. And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of communication in what we do. And the number one way that we can help people is when they trust us and have confidence in what we're doing for them. When they have the confidence and trust and things get challenging, like we're seeing today with the volatility in markets, it keeps them on their path for what we're trying to achieve together. And you can only keep them on track through trust and confidence. So it's important for people to understand that, when you're trying to sell your service to somebody or product or whatever it may be. Super interesting. Super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The part that I find most interesting, though, is the introvert part, because as an introvert, if it's important for the bonding part of the relationship and you're an introvert, maybe you're a little bit more anxious to get to know that person, right? So if I'm an
Absolutely.
introvert and somebody who's listening to this is an introvert, what do you say to them?
Well, again, it's sort of training you to come out of your comfort zone temporarily. And that's what we find with introverts. You may not want to meet this person. You may not feel good, or you're anxious talking to this person, but we work with you to sort of get you ready to interact with this person in a way that's not threatening, and to ask the right questions. You're really going in for a conversation to learn about the person and to sort of reduce that threat so that the introvert can put themselves out there and do the right thing. It doesn't mean we're going to convert you into an extrovert. What it means is for that period of time, one example, if you look at some of the TV hosts, if you remember back to Johnny Carson, he was always talking about how he's such an introvert, but he was on TV every single night entertaining people and interviewing guests. But when he went to a party, he was by himself in a corner. He didn't want to deal with people. And I deal in the media a fair bit, and a lot of the entertainment people I know are like that. They can go and perform, and you think they're the most outgoing people, but the reality is they want to retreat into their own minds, and relax at home and not really go out and party all the time.
So why is it that when you get on stage, do they turn this on? How is that?
Because they have that talent and it works. They overcome that fearfulness or anxiety because they're so good at what they do, right? They're a great comedian, they're a great performer, and they know that's how they make their living. So they can go out and do that for an hour or 2 hours, but then come back into feeling more comfortable again.
So why do they go from that on stage, but then if they're at a party, they're not the same type of person?
Because they don't have to perform at a party. I mean, if we're on TV right now, I got to make you laugh. I got to do this. If you and I are just alone or at a party, I don't really have to talk to you. There's no motivation for that. I feel more comfortable just sort of sitting at my table and eating my food, right? And you see that a lot where these people don't want to interact in social situations. They'd rather retreat on their own.
And when we think about the personality of these people, right? Take Johnny Carson, is that something that he's born with, or did he learn that? Did he do things like, for example, we're a big lacrosse family, and the way we say to get better at the sport is to practice, practice, practice. So Do they do something to get to their level?
Yeah, absolutely. So the personality part stays the same. And research on personality shows throughout your life, if you're kind of introverted, you're going to be that way from when you're 6 years old, 20 years old, 50, and even into your 80s. You're going to be relatively introverted, but you can practice being assertive, and doing these skills that we're talking about. You can get better at them. You can practice. You can be empathic. You can learn these skills and then just put them away when you don't want to use them. So again, think of them as skills. I go to the gym, I work out, I build my muscles, but I'm not going to be strong all the time. I'm not going to use them all the time, but when I need them, they're there.
Love it. So, Stephen, I want to go into your business now that we understand exactly what you do. So, you talked about it before. You built tests for psychologists to use when they sit down with their patients. Then you went into working with prisoners, right? And then corporate. So if we break down the different verticals of your business now, what percentages of your business is working with corporations?
Wow. It's probably maybe 60% corporate at this point.
And the other?
That would be maybe, oh boy, that's a tough one. 25% clinical and the rest maybe public safety.
Got it. And so, again, this a lot of my audience are founders of businesses. So when we think about, so you had this great concept in psychology. It's a passion that you obviously enjoy and love, but then you took it and brought it and built a business with 230 employees. I know you said that before, just to confirm that, correct?
Yep.
Right. So, so it's quite amazing. Now, do you think that you got to your level because you did understand the business aspect and this is something that you recognize that you can scale?
Actually, it's more about understanding what I didn't understand. And I think that's an issue with a lot of entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs I work with feel they know everything. And I went in differently. I went in feeling I don't know anything, right? So I was able to find advisors to surround myself with early on. Like my father-in-law was a very successful business person. He was an accountant by training. So it was like having a mini board of directors. I brought on people to sort of advise, but I would do the things that I was best at, which was the science, the psychology, that component. So knowing that I had to fill gaps, I think played an important role in my ability to grow the business. I didn't mind having someone else do the accounting. I know nothing about accounting, as long as they knew what they were doing, right? And that moved on. I started out doing marketing, customer service, product development. I was doing all, when you got 3 people in your company, you got to do that. But I sort of learned to find really good people to do each of those components, to the point now where I just have a ball going to a marketing meeting and I don't understand half of what they're saying. Everything's so far into social media and digital marketing, but I love learning and listening to these really bright young kids who are excelling at this kind of work.
I mean, that's really terrific. So the one thing I really want to help people understand is that you had this great concept and idea, you had this passion for psychology. So let's say, okay, you built your product initially. The product was working with clinical psychologists, and then it evolved from there. But once you had this product and you look at your product and say, this is an awesome product, people have to know about this, right? In order for me to grow, people have to know about this. So in the very beginning, how do you take something that's a great concept and idea in your mind and then start to get the word out? What did you do?
So I started training myself in marketing. I guess it was like a street MBA. I started learning whatever I could about marketing. And, first thing I learned was the great marketer at the time was a guy named Ogilvy. So I started reading his books. I started saying, what does this guy do? How does it work? And, I said, to get the message out, we got to be able to market. And one of the things I did early on, I couldn't afford to hire a marketing person. But what I did is I found out the client, all these reports said Ogilvy and Mather was the #1 marketing company in the world. So I called up the local Ogilvy and Mather company and I said, what, I can't afford you guys, but is there anybody there who's kind of retiring or maybe, looking for a change at whatever? And they found me this woman who was a former executive at Ogilvy, And I told her what our business was, and she thought that was fascinating. So she says, "Yeah, I'll come and help you." So I sort of hired her for a little bit of money as a consultant, and she really trained me. She taught me about marketing, how to write copy, how to do a catalog, how to get it out there, how to, about mailing, how to test A and B, all that marketing stuff, right? So that really got me going. That started increasing our sales early on, spending very little money, getting a top expert to help out.
That is fascinating. That is so cool that you made that phone call, and that just goes to show you that I know you didn't know a lot about business, but you did recognize you have a great product. And I've always said this, Stephen, throughout my entire career, every single quarter, especially in the beginning, I would meet with the best financial advisors, whatever firm that I was at, right? I never forget this one gentleman, Andy Burrish, who was at UBS, number one advisor. I called him up and I said, Andy, here's what I'm looking. I'd love to basically be you. What do I need to do? He goes, if you can do X, Y, and Z, come out and fly and see me. So literally that following week, I was out in Wisconsin, met with him, and learned so much from him. So, it's just, when you have a real passion about what you do and you love what you do and you want to get better, it's picking up that phone and doing whatever it takes, and that's really cool. Good for you. So, what were the top three things you learned about marketing?
I learned that it was a lot like psychology, that you test. You have different, headlines or pieces, marketing pieces, and you send one to one group and a different one to a different group, and you see which one performs better. That's like a psychology experiment. We do that all the time. We put people through things and see what the effects of that are. So that was one. Another one that she taught me was really how to write good copy. Like, what were the key elements about being positive, about how a headline, how you don't really directly attack your competitors, but you show your strengths over their weaknesses, right? You emphasize your strengths, and just general writing skills. I think were really important. That you write at a. I'm an academic. I'm a PhD. You don't write at that level. You write at a grade 4 level, and she
Absolutely.
taught me how to, I won't say dumb down, but to bring my words so that anybody could understand it at a grade 4 level. Even if you're a PhD, because I'm dealing with psychologists as customers, write it to a grade 4 level,
Absolutely.
and you always keep it at that level. So she helped me really develop some of those skills to be able to sort of carry on.
Mhm. And one of the things that, one of the focuses of my business is to work with founders and help them exit successfully. It's a big part of what we do. And so when you think about your business with 230 employees, one of the most important parts of a business to increase valuation of a business is that the business is not reliant on the founder. What is your thoughts in regards to that?
I
And
think
where does your business stand as it relates to that?
critical, very important point. And I've thought about that for a long time. So I have a team, I have an executive team where at this, I'm not even the CEO anymore. I have a CEO. So as I mentioned, I started looking for smart people to bring into the organization. So I started, as I mentioned, with accounting, because I don't know anything about that. And then I brought in other people in terms of product development, in terms of marketing. And right now we have an executive team that covers all the areas: HR, marketing and sales, and all those areas. And I'm the executive chair. So these people are able to run the business. If I'm not here, these people can run the business. I don't have to be involved in everything. And we meet every couple of weeks and go over, whatever we have to go over at that point.
Mhm. So you did a good job delegating. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all
Yeah.
about delegation.
Yeah. So can you just speak quickly about delegation so people understand? Because people have a hard time doing that. I did initially. I got over it pretty quickly, and thankfully, it's been a game changer.
Well, it's turned into this concept that I think I mentioned earlier that we call unconditional love, which meaning you really have to trust people. You have to get people that are good, select the right people, and that's number one. But number two is you have to trust them. And even when someone's making mistakes, and I've had people who obviously make mistakes, I've made mistakes, but I have to accept that. I can't fly off the handle because I know somebody did something in a wrong direction or lost us money because of a bad decision. If that's a good person, and if they come back and say, "This is what I learned from that experience," I think that's fine. I'm not going to sweat over that. And I think that's a difficult thing. A lot of us are command and control. We want to have our fingers in everything. We want to be controlling it. And for me, it was really backing off of that ensuring that the person had integrity and what they tried was a good try, and that maybe I would have tried something like that even. And if it didn't work, not to lay blame on them, but to understand what they learned from it. And if you can do that, I think you overcome some of your greatest fears in delegation.
I agree. So, as a founder of a business, we have a decision to make all the time. We have our revenue, we have our expenses, and then we have the bottom line profits. And when you look at those bottom line profits, if we reinvest back into the business, we save money on tax. And when we reinvest back into the business, if we can grow that, uh, return on invested capital 10, 15%. So when you think about the savings and taxes is 30, 40%, and then you grew that by 10 to 15%, that whole number, we're talking about a rate of return north of 50, 60%.
Hmm.
Right? So I wonder how you think about this, knowing that. And the other part is, well, I do have to invest in assets outside of that as well, just in case something happens here.
Right.
But it's also healthy to do that. So how have you thought about profits?
So profit's critical to us. We always think in terms of profits. We even have a profit sharing plan so that everybody in our organization thinks about profit. We want everybody, not to be, spend wildly or whatever, to see the value of the money. So yes, we reinvest in the company significantly. So we have a very good war chest because we've done a number of acquisitions and we continue to do acquisitions. So our war chest is for that. We also invest some money outside the company. So we use investment brokers like yourself to help us make those decisions. And we diversify that investment. Some of it's in the stock market. Some of it may be bonds, GICs, like things that are more secure. But we have a really good portfolio on the outside, and we keep that within our trust. So we work with experts in terms of getting the most efficient tax savings in terms of how we do both things. We invest within the company and we invest outside of the company as well.
And how do you think about the ratio of that? So, for example, if you have $1 profit, do you say to yourself, I'm going to put 30 cents over here just because so invest in assets here so I can grow assets here, and I'll keep 70 cents in the company, reinvest it. Is there a ratio that you think of or not really?
Well, see, I didn't really. I mean, I think the first thing, as an entrepreneur, I was just dying to make a profit. So, so I spent many years just hoping to make a profit. Once we started being profitable, then the goal was how big can we build that war chest, that profit. So that was really the focus for the longest period of time. And then, my advisors would say, you got a lot of money sitting in this company. It's probably too much money sitting in this company. You're doing really well. I think you should take, for a number of reasons, including like liability. If someone sues you, they can get that money. So you should take a lot of that money out of the company and invest it elsewhere. So it wasn't really in terms of a percentage. It's just sort of what feels right to take out and what feels right to leave in. I know that sounds kind of squishy, but that's how we do it. I think about some of the acquisitions that we've done. For example, we did one not long ago in Ireland, in Northern Ireland. And what it costs us to do that. And I want to have that. I don't want to go to banks. I've had my days of going to banks. I've been rejected by banks in the past. They didn't think we had a viable business. So banks come to us now, and we decide if we want to deal with them. So we keep a big enough war chest in there that if something comes along that we want to acquire, we can do it. And it's not too big a bite out of what we got.
That's excellent. So the main mission we have, I talked about a little bit about before, is, again, working with founders, but getting to the point where work is optional. I wrote a book about it over my shoulder. And that means you have complete financial independence. It's how you win the game of money. That's how we think of it. It's you work because you want to, not because you have to. Do you think about that? Do you say to yourself, when am I going to get to the point where, or maybe you're at the point now where you're financially independent? Is that important to you? Or are you just like head in the weeds with the business, not really thinking about that?
I really love to read your book. No, I've always thought about it. To me, my business, I see it as my sandbox. Honestly, I don't have to work. I'm quite well off right now. I love what I do.
Good.
I'm passionate about what I do. One of the side businesses I do that we didn't even get into was I work in reality TV. I consult to dozens and dozens of reality TV shows. I screen all their applicants. I
Wow.
work with issues they have during the production, and I help do follow up. And I shouldn't say this out loud, but I've told some producers, I have so much fun at this. You don't even have to pay me to do this. But
Wow.
that's a dangerous thing to say because some of them might take me up on that. So I work because I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. I have so much fun. And I drive my wife crazy if I stayed home all the time. And I'm not a golfer. I play tennis, and that only takes a couple hours in a day. So, I just feel so blessed and so fortunate that I have the luxury to do whatever I want. I could spend the rest of my time traveling. I could do anything. And my wife wishes I would travel more, quite frankly. But yeah, so I'd love to read your book because I'm in that position where everything I do is because I choose to do it.
That's
Everything.
that's what it's all about. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what it's all about. I'm trying to, just see the reason why I wrote the book is because I felt that retirement and the word retirement was so archaic. It's
Mhm.
not about saying at 65 I'm going to retire, or at 62, or when I get Social Security, or when my cousin retired, that's when I'm going to retire. It's about saying to yourself is how quickly can I get to the point where work is optional, where I'm working because I want to. I mean, listen to what you just said, not because I have to. Look at Warren Buffett still working at 95 because he
Yeah.
really loves it, and I can, God willing, see that in myself, God willing, we all stay healthy, things like that. So, I mean, that's exactly what I want. But I just want to ask you this one last question. So if I'm listening to this and you said it, that you think you're well off, do you say you think you're well off and that you're financially independent because you know factually, or you just think? And when I say no factually, meaning that you have an actual plan that told you that, or you just know back of the envelope?
Uh, well, people have told me that. A financial advisor, well, you're doing really well. There's a lot of money in the bank or wherever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know I have a lot of assets. I have several. I have cottage. I have a
Yeah.
Florida
You don't
home.
have
I
to
have
go
a
into all the details. Yeah.
multiple homes. So, yeah, I'm not finance. I don't borrow anything. I'm not financed by anybody. There's a lot of money behind, in the bank and invested. So yeah, it's real that I have the finances I need,
Yep.
and yeah, it's not made up.
Yeah, and that wouldn't include you selling your business to be financially independent. You're saying based on where you are today, and
Yeah,
like I said, there's two parts. Here's our businesses is right here, and that's worth something. And then there's
yeah,
our assets we accumulated, and that's worth something. You're talking about the assets you have outside of your business is the part where you're
yes,
feeling financially independent without selling your business.
absolutely. I could do anything I want with the assets I have right now. I could
That
travel
is,
the world. I could do whatever I want. I don't even think about it. That's the other crazy thing. My kids think I'm nuts, but I still think like I'm an early entrepreneur. I'm afraid to, I'm not cheap, but I don't spend money loosely. I'm very careful. But certain things, I'm also a musician, I'm a saxophone player, and I will spend whatever. I've got like 10 really high level saxophones. And, I'll spend money on that instantly. But ask me about a stock or about, I don't know, other things. I'm very cautious about how I would spend that money. So it's just a mindset. I think it's all about a mindset. I don't think of myself as a wealthy person, and I sit with my staff and we have lunch together, and I'm just one of them. Um, I mean, you're asking me about it, so I'm thinking about it. But day to day, it doesn't even cross my mind. But if I want something, I want to buy a boat, I can go buy a boat. Those things, I don't worry about money. And again, I'm just very fortunate. I'm
yeah.
telling you because you asked me. I wouldn't ordinarily talk about this.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, it's important for a lot of founders to understand this because a lot of them are in the weeds and they're not really picking their head up. You have to think about all of this. Financial independence and a race to that is important because once you get there, you could kind of calm down a little bit. Still do what you do, still enjoy it, you have a passion for it, but when you get to that point and you know it, it's a really, really great feeling.
Mhm.
That's the ultimate goal. And I just want to touch upon the other thing you just said. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be wealthy, quote unquote, to have financial independence because it all depends on you. Everybody, and I always say this, I talked about it in my book, is that the question everybody needs to know is like, okay, what is your number? Maybe your number's 2 million, maybe it's 3 million, maybe it's five, right? Maybe it's more. But the biggest thing that people have to understand is like, what is your number to be financial independent? And everybody's different. But Stephen, I really enjoyed this conversation very much. I hope you did as well.
Yes, I did. It's great.
Yeah. If there's, if you'd like to share with us anything that would be helpful to your business, now would be a great time to do that.
Well, my website is stevenstein.com, and you can buy one of my books, The EQ Edge, that you see over behind my shoulder, or Hardiness, Dealing with Resilience and Stress is another one of my books. So if you can get that, go ahead.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Stephen, for your time today. Really, really appreciate it, and looking forward to building a relationship in the future.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Phil. It was great.